Hey, it's Ed. Before we get started, I want to thank Neil Crescenti. Neil recently signed up to support the podcast via Patreon. And if you're interested in learning more about those options, you can go to mountainandpray.com/support. But huge thanks to Neil. I really, really appreciate it. Second thing is the Bozeman event. It's coming up next month on August 30th, which is a Friday, at the historic Ellen Theater right downtown in Bozeman. It's going to be a really fun evening. I encourage you to go and check out the info on it, mountainandpray.com/Bozeman. But I've got 4 amazing women who are going to be joining me to answer my questions and your questions. It's going to be Kate Havstad, Jillian Lekuski, Becca Skinner, and Juanita Vero. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Third thing, anybody who is in Tucson, Arizona or nearby should mark your calendars for September 21st of this year. I'm going to be down there with the Altar Valley Conservation Alliance at their annual fundraiser doing a little talk. So I'm super excited about that. It's obviously for a great cause. I'm really looking forward to getting to Arizona and seeing that valley and seeing some of the cool conservation work they're doing down there. So you can go to mountainandpray.com/Tucson to learn more about that event. Thanks for your patience as I do these announcements at the beginning. I've found that even though I've got a decent social media following, a lot of those social media services end up giving you this great audience and then making you pay to reach them all. And I know that y'all listen to this, and you guys are the ones I'm trying to reach, not some strangers with hashtags and that kind of silly stuff. So I feel like this is the best way to get the info out, just trying to put info in front of you that I think you'll find is interesting. So appreciate your patience. This is a great podcast coming up. Hope you enjoy it. Hey, this is Ed Robertson, and this is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast, where I introduce you to some of the innovative individuals who are shaping the future of the American West. I meet most of these people through my work in land conservation or through my hobbies and interests that revolve around spending time up high in the mountains. My guests include ranchers, writers, entrepreneurs, conservationists, athletes, artists, adventurers, pretty much anyone who's doing important work, has an interesting story, and loves the American West. My guest today is Morgan Irons. Morgan is a Montana-based artist whose captivating oil paintings combine the classic style of late 19th century painters with her own modern-day interpretation of the West's people and places. When I was first introduced to Morgan's art, I assumed I was looking at the work of a classically trained artist who'd been in the trenches of paintings for decades, and I couldn't have been more wrong. Morgan's only been painting since 2015, with virtually no artistic training prior. Her innate talent is matched only by her work ethic and commitment to the craft. She's built her life around the process of making art, which is inspiring and instructive for anyone with creative aspirations. Morgan was born in Durango and spent her youth in various parts of the West, including Alaska and Idaho. After college in the flat Midwest, she immediately returned to more rugged landscapes, working in Alaska and eventually landing in Bozeman. She tried her hand at a, quote, normal job, but found the corporate world to be uninspiring and frustrating. So rather than wallow and complain, she moved on from that job and soon thereafter discovered her talent for painting. Since then, she's gone all in on her career as an artist, and her work and reputation in the art world is growing and evolving quickly. If you're a person who dreams of pursuing your creative passions full-time, then you'll love this episode. It's full of actionable ideas around art and the creative process. We talk about the remote cabin where Morgan lives and paints, and why she needs solitude and open spaces for maximum creative output. We talk about her daily routine and how she primes her artistic mindset through hiking, meditation, and writing. We also talk about how she blocks out distractions and her techniques for using the productive aspects of social media while avoiding the time-wasting traps. We obviously talk about the point when she discovered her talent for painting and how she's honed that talent through workshops and mentorships from top painters. Finally, Morgan tells some great stories about hunting for ghosts with her dad, her favorite books, a bear that broke into her car, and the importance of having no plan B. Hope you enjoy this episode. Maybe the best way to start is you had to come into town to get a reliable internet connection so we could do
Yes.
this. So could you talk a little bit about kind of where your home base is?
Sure. Yeah. So I live just outside of Bozeman, up on kind of a high point in a mountain canyon out on 10 acres that back right up into national forest. So it's pretty remote and it's beautiful. Supposedly I have neighbors down the road that I've never seen. They're in their 90s and really private. So it's fine by me, but it's
That's
great.
Awesome. So what attracted you to that? Because just from reading around online a little bit, it sounds like you had maybe been in Bozeman and you moved away and then you were back. So what is it about that remote setting, but either personally or professionally or creatively
Sure.
that strikes a chord with you?
It's really of utmost importance, priority in my life to live that way. And it's been, it was 4 years of that when I first moved to Bozeman, living out in another canyon outside of town, on 50 acres. And for me, it's self-preservation. It's having the ability to not be swayed by other people, have, an entire day to not be bothered.
Sure.
And just to work. And I really like being out in nature. There's something about having that connection and just that sense of presence that it requires of you there's just something innate. And I really don't like living around people.
Really?
Yeah, I really genuinely enjoy being alone. And I think maybe my therapist would have a different answer for you. But
We want me to do a 3-way call and get her in?
Right.
Well, all right. So when I was looking at your bio, it made me feel like a very, very old man.
Really?
Yes, because several things. One, born in 1991. I think I was in middle
last
school.
Last day
then.
of the year, 91.
Yeah. And then the other thing is there was some discussion or talk about how you've done a lot of your kind of teaching yourself how to paint and teaching yourself art through the internet. So like when I was a kid or not even, 20 years ago, if you moved out to a cabin out in the middle of the woods, you are completely alone. But now we have these silly phones and these computers that are pumping distraction in. So like, how do you balance that between using it for good, like you do to learn, with keeping it out of your head and allowing yourself to have a clear mind for your work?
Oh, it's a constant struggle. I have to be really careful about, I struggle a lot with the Instagram thing and trying to keep some distance from that and not being too invested in that whole game. But there's such value in seeing. I don't think I would be doing what I'm doing now if I didn't have that access to seeing. It's kind of where I discovered art. It's where I learned that people were still painting the way that I paint. And so it's such a valuable tool. Yeah, but at the same time, I can tell a difference if I'm spending too much time, looking at other artists and what they're doing and the feedback they're getting and the praise, or, there is a sense of, oh, maybe, they're doing that, I should try that. But you have to kind of put your head down and stay focused on your work. And so I really limit my time on that sort of thing.
But I'm asking this out of like pure self-interest because it's so damn hard to stay off of that thing.
I know.
So how do you do it? I mean, is there?
So literally, what I do is every day I delete it off of my phone.
That's what I do.
Really?
Yes, I delete it, and if I have to check it, I have to reinstall it.
Yeah, so it makes it a huge pain in the ass for yourself, but it's worth it. And otherwise, you lose hours. You won't even realize.
Well, yeah, you lose hours, just straight up hours from looking at it, and then I think it just puts this residue of distraction in your brain that takes a while to get that out and get your momentum going. And that's just for me, definitely doing spreadsheets about real estate deals. I couldn't imagine what it's like trying to muster creativity out of nowhere.
Yeah, you're trying to reach the ethers, and you're stuck in Instagram. And yeah, I think there's also, a performative aspect that Instagram kind of instills in people that is dangerous. It's like everyone thinks they have their own TV show now, and it's not why I want to do the work, and it's not in my nature. And so I don't know, it's a tricky thing.
Well, yeah, it's a valuable tool.
Totally.
And I've finally admitted that, because a lot of this podcast and a lot of the great relationships I've formed came through learning about people's work through Instagram. That's how I learned about you. And that's how I learned about, all the women that are going to be in the live podcast event. And so there's obviously great value there. I mean, my life is better because of that. But at the same time, there's this dark side to it where it can take you down a really
you have
place.
to be in control of it. And
So let's back up for a minute and all the way back to 91 when I was like a young man and you were just being born. So where were you born?
I was born in Durango.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I love Durango.
I haven't been back since. So I'm dying to get out there. But my parents met in flight school. And so when I was born, we lived in a little trailer on a runway on top of a bluff out there. And my dad was a flight instructor, and so we lived there. And I did some time in Alaska then, and then grew up mostly in Idaho. So kind of, the Wood River Valley area.
Yep.
Trailer behind what used to be the Sinclair station off the main drag there, and then in Boise the rest of the time. And
was art always a part of your life? Just were you an artistic kid?
I was definitely an artistic kid. I was always the art kid in school, and but the idea of ever pursuing art or even knowing that was a possibility didn't enter my reality until I was 23. And so I had never painted or, even thought about that.
Really? Like you had never seriously painted at all? No.
I had, art class in school, watercolor week or whatever, but no, never anything I think Idaho is a really, blue collar state.
Sure.
And, and I didn't grow up, with much access to fine art, or I didn't know any working artists at all. It was just totally a foreign concept.
And so you get out of high school, what did you do?
Yeah, I got out of high school, and I was pretty academically driven at that time.
Yep.
I really wanted to be successful and kind of have a ticket out. And I did what I thought, everyone told me to do, is just go to college. And I ended up getting a degree in psychology. I went to St. Louis University.
Yep.
Which I hated.
Did you really?
Oh, yeah.
Why did you hate it? Did you hate St. Louis, or did you hate school, or both?
School was okay. I was, I got by. I was pretty all right at it. But it felt, like I was going through the motions more than being excited about anything. And St. Louis was so much of a city, and it's so flat, and I felt just entirely like I was in the wrong place.
Yeah.
So it was my senior year of college. I had this, almost animalistic need to get the F out of there. And when I was, an infant, my parents took me, I was like 2 months old, up to Alaska, and my dad was a bush pilot out in the Wrangles. And so I had kind of all of these fables from my childhood about Alaska. And so when I was a senior in college and I was trying to figure out what my next moves would be, I was in the library, and I just started Googling lodges in Alaska that might be hiring. And and I applied to the one that my dad worked at, but he was really young at the time. They had me young. He was probably 23 years old as a bush pilot out there, and he is taking a client out, is out in the Wrangell, so super rugged and remote. And so we lived in a little bare bones cabin, and he was taking a client, flying them out of the lodge, and made a young mistake and miscalculated his fuel and ended up having to put down the plane in the backcountry and was essentially lost in the woods for a while. They called off the searches and told my mom, with an infant, that we're sorry.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and he ended up they had left the plane thinking they knew where they were, and of course that doesn't always work out that well. So they ended up getting found on Easter morning. So it was kind of this long-running joke that he was risen, on Easter.
Oh, man, that is crazy.
So anyway, that lodge didn't hire me.
Just for a side diversion,
yeah.
Tell me about your dad. What is his story? Because when you said bush pilot, I instantly thought, all right, this guy is cool, interesting, and probably a little nuts, because I've flown with some of those guys, and they're crazy in a good way.
Yeah, they're crazy, and he's a commercial pilot now, so he's
you better not name the airline.
Stable. I know. I know.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so he did that, and so after the plane went down, my mom, she's a new young mom, and she's like, I really need a second parent here, so we need to figure out if this is going to work or not. And so then they ended up moving us to Idaho, and it took him a while to get back into flying after that. I think it was kind of a defeat for a young kid, essentially.
Yeah.
And but he eventually started, he got back into it and flew cargo and now commercial, and I was able to make a more stable living of it with children.
Wow, that's cool. And so did Alaska work out at all? Did you end up going up there to a different place?
Yeah. I ended up applying at this other lodge, and and I had minimal outdoor. I grew up, we call it hillbilly camping. You just park a chair and drink a beer by the river, and so that was kind of the extent of my outdoor experience growing up in Idaho. And so I didn't have, any major hiking or backpacking or anything like that. And so I applied for this position, as they call it. So the lodge is mostly fishing. It's right on the Kenai River, and but they also have a bear camp and what they call their safari side, which is nothing to do with animals, but biking, kayaking, hiking, rafting, and horseback riding. And so I applied for that position and sent them just like a photo of me outside.
Yeah.
and they hired me on. So I graduated college and flew out there. And it was truly the catalyst for everything else in my life.
What do you mean by that? Like the cat?
It was, so I flew out there to this fish camp.
Yep.
And I was, 21, 22 years old. And, suddenly in this really remote area with, 2 other women, maybe in a sea of dudes and fish, and it was wild. And so I ended up, my job ended up being to be in charge of kind of coordinating this bear camp they had that was out in Chinitna Bay, which is some of the, if not the most amazing bear viewing in the world. Just in the first day, you fly out there, in bush plains, you land on the beach, and it's all, protected bear viewing, national park. And so the lodge, they were homesteaded in, so they were kind of grandfathered into this location. So it was really lucky to get to be there. And the first day I was there, you stand in one spot, within an hour you can count 30 brown bears.
Wow.
it's wild. And so I think being out there and being so remote, kind of for the first time in my semi-adult life, was a game changer. It was, a profoundly moving experience, and
just felt like it kind of made sense, like it fit with everything.
It suddenly, I kind of went full circle. I saw kind of what my parents saw in it when I was, an infant, and I think coming from the city, and just, I felt so much more connected and at home, and just more capable, and more in my body, and more just aware of myself. And so it was really important at that age to kind of see that. And so I spent, a while up there, and then when that was getting ready to end, I knew that I didn't want to go back to Idaho. Uh-huh. I felt really overwhelmed. I felt like I went through this, this big life-changing thing, and you feel kind of lonely in that, because it's hard to describe to people, and it's just such a different way of living up there. Yeah.
Well, I haven't lived up there, but I've had two pretty hardcore life-changing experiences.
Have you?
Yeah, and I same thing. I mean, I wasn't there for as long as you were, but like when you come back, it's kind of like everybody's just doing the same thing they've done, and all of a sudden you've had this really transformative experience, and it's kind of a weird thing, because you're like, well, I had this experience, but nothing else changed, and my brain kind of explodes.
Was that a dream? 100%. Yeah, it was. Yeah, getting back, and even driving in traffic, and it was really difficult to integrate back. And so I was like, I gotta go somewhere. I gotta find, what's like the next best thing, and that was Montana. It kind of had that, to me, that kind of grandiose feeling, and I had, some experiences from my childhood visiting the Paradise Valley area. Yep. And Yellowstone, of course. And so I was like, I'm just gonna go find a cabin in Montana, and I did. So that was, it was.
What year was that?
That was end of 2014.
End of 2014.
Yeah.
So you show up in Montana. And then when I looked at your website initially, like a long time ago, I saw that it said you started painting in 2015. I was like, oh, she's got a typo on her. That's not a good place to have a typo on the bio page. but that's true. So you started. So what led to that? Because I'm not blowing smoke or anything, but when you see your work, it looks like, and I'm not an art connoisseur. I like art, but I don't know all the terminology, but it looks like European art from the late 1900s or like late 1800s.
Yeah, that's exactly the time period that I'm inspired by. So,
I mean, but I don't understand. I don't understand how you...
it's been a wild ride. I'll see if I can piece it together. So when I first moved to Bozeman, I took some time, not to work, and I had some money saved, and but that was, obviously starting to run out after a few months, and so I took a job at the hospital with my degree doing as a psychometrist. So I was doing all of the testing for the neuropsychologists at the hospital. So IQ tests, attention tests, things like that. And I'm in this windowless office and hardly making a living wage, especially for Bozeman standards. And so part of my job was to score all these tests, and it's a lot of, adding up all these small numbers, and I hated the job, and my boss comes in one day, and he's just, this doughy, arrogant guy, and he comes in all serious, and he sits down, and he's like, so, have you had problems with addition before in your life?
Oh my God.
And I was just like, okay, something is not right here. Like, this is clearly not where my talents are. And at the same time, I had started to, Bozeman has a great gallery scene. And so I had started to kind of see that and I started to meet working artists. And it truly was like, a door opened up on the side of my life, and someone was like, a mistake has been made. We put you in the wrong life, and here's the one you're supposed to be in. And it was clear as day that that's what I all along should have been thinking about and doing, was making art. And so that day, of the meeting at work, and, I was crying in the bathroom, and I was like, I got to leave this. And so I didn't even give notice. I think it was a Friday, and I sent an email, and never done that before, but I just had to
that guy
reprioritize. Yeah, he was a real jerk. And
maybe when I'm up there, I'll invite, when I'm up there in August, I'll send him a personalized invite to the podcast. He's just the kind of guy I'd like to hang out with.
I know, right?
But like, I get that. I mean, I hear exactly what you're saying, but because like in this podcast, I didn't really know that I cared all that much about art, but some of the best conversations I've had on here have been with artists, and I feel like I fully understand, not fully, but I understand. I'm very interested in the creative process. I'm interested in how they do what they do, but that's a lot. And I feel like I have a connection with those people, but that's a lot different than if I just decided to go buy a paint set today at the art store and then all of a sudden I could do it, because there's no way that's going to happen. So what was the point? Like, when was the exact point when you were like, I've got a talent for this beyond just connecting with these people in this scene? Like, I can do it.
Well, so it kind of happened. So I quit my job before I started painting, and which I don't recommend people doing. It wasn't very responsible, but so I went out and I bought paints, and I started to try and learn how to put paint on the canvas. And at the time, Instagram was kind of starting to get popular, and there were some resources I could find online, some books, I got at the library, and I think the biggest thing for me was I would spend 2 to 3 hours every single day, for those first 2 years, seeking out and looking at really good art.
Yeah.
And just, breaking it down, and cataloging it as far as what art I really connected to and why. And I'd see, patterns through all of these paintings. And so it was truly a deep dive into, so I had a true North Star, because I knew exactly how I wanted to paint and why. And that first year, when you're faced with something that is so vast, I felt really overwhelmed. So I was like, well, I need to put a limit on myself. I need to somehow create a parameter so that I can focus down instead of, outwards in all directions. So I said, I will only paint the land I live on and the people that I know for that whole, first couple of years. And so that's what I did. And I made a ton of shitty paintings, and some of them are still in my closet. Some of them I've gotten rid of. And I just started, and I tried really hard, and it was, I have a very obsessive personality about one thing, which is painting. Mm-hmm. And it takes having you're walking the line between having a really objective eye about, holding your painting up next to this masterful painting. What's the difference? Really break it down and be honest with yourself. But then you also have to have, in order to keep going and not just crumble, you have to have kind of a naive arrogance that your work is worth something, and in order to keep going. So I walk that line. But
do you enjoy the process of painting? Like when you're doing it, when you're in the middle of it, do you enjoy it, or is it hard, or it kind of vary day to day?
I think it varies every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's, I kind of run the whole gamut every single day of, agony and ecstasy, really. It's, painting to me is such a mirror, and each painting is really important to me. So it's, when it's going good, there's no better feeling. And when it's going poorly, it's, it's awful.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Cause you're putting yourself out there, I think in any creative pursuit, but that's the deal, is you're putting it out there. And once it's out there, it's out there. And it's
exactly,
well, I really admire that. And I'm still just amazed by the timing, because you're saying, I did a lot of really bad paintings. And if you hear some grizzled old artist, you're like, that was 50 years ago. Yours was like 3.5 years ago.
Yeah, I know. I
mean, it's awesome.
And I think I see how much more I want to improve. And I have to kind of be, to me, like the technical aspect of painting, and, obviously I want to be the best painter I can be, but that's not the priority to me. The priority is making art that is meaningful and that has, shows the love and the, I think, the most beloved painters in history aren't the ones that are the most, technically skilled, but they're the ones that people connect with most, and they have the most soul and the most story, and there's some kind of intangible thing about their work. And so I try to rest easy in that space, and the technical stuff will come as I get older and I learn more.
Well, that's a question I have is I think artists that stand out to me, they're doing, just from my untrained eye, they're doing really unique things that are unlike anybody else. And that's what attracted me to your work. And that's what's attracted me to all the different artists I've had on here. But so how do you balance that? You said you have spent and still spend time looking at people you admire. So how do you keep your originality or continue to do your own thing without just ending up kind of copying these people? Because I would think that it could seep into your head.
It does.
And then you end up just kind of copying people.
Yeah.
You haven't. I'm just saying, like, if I were doing that, I would.
Oh yeah. Well, and I think especially when you're starting out, all artists copy in some sense or another, and I try to think of it as, humbly trying to add to the conversation. So it's, if I'm really inspired by somebody's work, I think that, I try to see what they're after, and usually, like, the core value of the painting is what inspires me. So that doesn't come across as copying as clearly. But I've also realized that, your hand kind of just does what your hand has tendencies to do. It's kind of like handwriting in a way. So it's, as much as you, even if you were trying to copy somebody, it's when you're making a body of work that's, as large as, it needs to be to make a living, your voice will come out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Have you ever read the book, The War of Art?
Oh, that's a great one. Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. And I don't know if this is in that book, but I've read and listened to everything I can by Stephen Pressfield. And there was some point where he said when he was a struggling writer and just, trying to find his voice, he would literally copy Hemingway. Like, he'd open a Hemingway book and start copying it and typing it out just to try to get in that flow and see what it felt like to write like that. Yeah. And, he's not copying Ernest Hemingway, but I think just kind of trying to figure out how to get in the head of these greats and channel some of that energy. And then you can find your own voice, I guess.
Yeah, and that was a really big tool for me when I was learning, was doing these master copies. So you literally copy a painting and you try to do it in the same manner, in the same the same order of application and things, and and you learn a ton that way.
Oh yeah,
it's so valuable. Yeah.
So you've obviously spent a ton of effort and focus, teaching yourself, but it sounds like from what I read that you've also had some formal instruction from both renowned artists, as well as some. It looks like you went to a recent immersive workshop. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you learned from that?
Yeah, it was so being out here in Montana. Obviously we have a ton of artists. Montana has like the highest amount of artists per capita of any state, but there is a lot of no one out here is really teaching the kind of painting that I want to be doing. So I have to travel if I want instruction. And so I try to do, one workshop a year. So that was my first year. I went, did a 1-day workshop with this artist, Jeremy Lipking, who is, a phenomenally incredible painter. And so that was a portrait workshop. And then the next year I did a 3-day workshop with this other artist, Joshua LaRock, who is, heavily classically trained. So it was really rigorous. And so I kind of had those two experiences that kind of helped me get past, as much as you study on your own, there are some things that are really hard to learn. Some of the more almost scientific aspects of painting.
Yep.
that just take someone pointing them out to you. And so then in January I had the opportunity to go study for a month of drawing in New York City at Grand Central Atelier, which is so they have a very methodical approach to drawing, and it's all from life, and you're spending 80 plus hours on a single drawing of a person in front of you, super detailed, and just very different than what I'm used to working. But it was really neat to see how they do things and kind of what their values are and how they overlap and how I differ. But being around other artists who are so nerdy and obsessive was really nice too. I don't get much of that here.
Yeah, you read my mind. That was going to be my next question. I was going to ask how much, like if you had to break it down, how much you learned from the instructors and then how much you learned from the other students. Because I've found that in situations like that, mine's like grad school stuff, but you learn more, or there's potential to learn more from your fellow students than the other the other professors. Is that right?
Absolutely. And totally. And there was, they have the full-time students there at the school, and so they're all incredible, and they are so knowledgeable. And so, as much as I could, I was, picking their brains, and they're all, young and just killing it. And they're still a huge resource. We connect, and I send them questions, and
that's great.
So it's great. Yeah, there's tapping into that community, because I had a lot of, being out here and being self-taught, I think, I had a lot of insecurity about not having the training that I sometimes thought I maybe needed or was missing out on, or maybe I wouldn't be, taken seriously without. But I'm really glad that I'm out here figuring it out on my own.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you got a perfect balance, because some of that stuff, it just sounds like it's technical, almost like instructional, like the scientific aspect of it, that it'd be a waste of time to try to figure it out on your own. It's not a creative thing, it's a technical thing. So if you can knock that out, then you can spend more time on the creative stuff. Yeah,
exactly, on the actual art making and those pursuits that I do on my own. Yeah.
What does your daily routine look like? I'm always interested in hearing this from artists, because
I am too.
It's, some of them that I've talked to, they kind of wait till they feel good about it, and then they start doing it. And then the majority of them get to work. I mean, they just sit down and start grinding. Yeah. So where do you fit on that spectrum?
I have, my entire day is kind of built around kind of wrangling this crazy person, which is myself, into creating art. So I have these kind of built-in things that I have to do to make sure that happens, and through trial and error. So I make sure. So and I also, it's important to me to have a lifestyle that feels good. Mm-hmm. So I don't believe in alarm clocks. That's just torturous. And so I wake up early anyway. I have, beautiful light that comes in, and a dog that is excited for every single day. So
oh yeah, that helps.
It helps a lot. And so I'm up early, and I put the coffee on, and I also really like where I live because there's so many hiking trails just outside my front door. And so we'll do, a big hike in the morning every day. And that also, buys me some time from the dog, just wearing him out. And just starting that day my day that way is really nice because it's just empty space for your mind. And
are you thinking about painting at that point, or are you trying not to think about painting?
I'm pretty much thinking about painting all day long.
Really? Mm-hmm. And is that fun, or is it torturous, or is it like the painting where it changes minute to minute?
It can be. I really enjoy thinking about painting. That's really where most of the work happens, is the time. I call it dinking around, and it's the most important part of the process for me, is having this time, away from the easel when I'm processing things, I'm solving problems in my head, I'm, referring to other paintings, and it's really where a lot of the work happens. So I think that there's some kind of a idea that you have to be laboring all day long to be considered a productive person. And I certainly have done that for a long time. But I'm realizing that as a creative person whose job it is to, physically pull things out of nothing and create something that it doesn't just come, it comes from above. You have to be open and ready to receive. And that sounds religious. I'm not at all, but
no, that's how Pressfield talks about it. Be open to the muse and doing the work and preparing yourself to be ready to receive it when it shows up.
Exactly.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I did these long hikes, and then by the time I get back, it's, if I really am still feeling squirrely, I'll do some writing in the morning. Just kind of getting all of my, whatever's on my mind out on paper really helps me. I tend to be kind of a neurotic person. I think, it's when you're working for yourself, everything's kind of on you to make or break your life. And so I'm never really checked out. So I have to do these things to make sure I'm mentally in the space that I need to be doing my best work. And so whether that's writing or meditating, that's been really helpful over the last year. I started doing that.
What does that look like?
To me, that looks like, sitting. I started with the Headspace app, a year ago, and I've stopped using that. I think the prompts were kind of getting in the way, and I don't think I meditate correctly at all. But
no, it's like it's like art. You just you got to do it your way. But I'm seriously committed to that, and it's made my life so much better. That's why I'm curious.
It's kind of a common thread between people I meet that are really living life and not working against themselves.
It's It is invaluable. And and I say this like kind of joking, but it's really true, is that it's invaluable for me, obviously, but my wife gets a lot more benefit from me not being a lunatic than I do from not being a lunatic. but
I know we got to be good to those people that have to deal with us.
Oh yeah. Oh man, I don't envy that. I'll give you a recommendation if you're looking for.
Oh yeah.
I've generally thought that the apps, that's like an oxymoron, because the phone is the problem, and so I don't want that near me when I'm meditating. But Sam Harris, who's written a bunch of books that are really good, and he's got a good podcast.
I like his podcast.
Yeah, well, he's got an app called Waking Up, and it is hands down the best meditation, mindfulness instruction of anything I've ever, and I've read, there's no telling how many books about meditation and everything from like Buddhist stuff to completely like atheist, secular stuff, and everything in between. And that app is the best. And
I'll have to look that up.
It's less about, calming down. It's not about that. It's more like about examining consciousness and seeing just kind of how your brain works. And I can't recommend it enough. And you get
that's awesome.
Yeah, so I'll have a link to that in the webpage for anybody who wants to look into it. But coming from somebody who's gone down every single path you can with that is the best. It's like your technical art teachers. Save yourself some time. And go to the Sam Harris app. Well, one other question I had kind of about your life out there is that you're obviously you're pretty on your own. You're self-sufficient, but it sounds like we have a lot of mutual friends, and so many people speak so highly of you just as a person, as a fun person to hang out with. So how do you balance that? Balance the solo time with the need for friendships and the kind of, I guess, the fuel that you get from having good friends. Yeah,
I know. I have some amazing friends, and I think, it's funny because it's been my work that has connected me with all of my good friends. I'm naturally, I think, a fairly shy person. I'm never the loudest one at a party but I think the people that I've met through my work they're all, young people who are like-minded in the way that they're all, pretty much self-driven and doing things that are, whether it's building businesses or other artists. And so they kind of understand the needs of that lifestyle. So we all are kind of on the same page as far as, hey, there's, an event tonight. Can you make it? Oh, I got to work on this project. No big deal. See you next time. And for a long time, I didn't have a sense of community. I was just really head down working and didn't see at the time the value in it. But now to me, it's it's amazing, the difference. And I'll see, usually I'm working, all during the week, and summer times here, we have like 2 months of summer in Montana.
Yeah.
So it's more busy than normal. So I'm having more fun than I normally do. And I'm trying to not resist that with every fiber of my being and work all the time. but I know that it's good for me. So it's, I will, a couple times a week, usually spend time with friends and I think that there's, and also, all of our work kind of overlaps at times. So we get to do projects together, like with the Common Ground Project. That's how I got connected with Daniel Anderson and Melissa DeNino. And so it's really cool when all of our work can kind of come together and build something. And that's new for me. And that's something I really want to keep exploring.
That's great. That stuff's important. I think it's easy to, if you're ambitious and focused, it's easy to think that is a waste of time or that it's not important now. Yeah. But I think it just makes life richer. And I'm the same way as you. Even though I have this podcast, I talk to people. I'm generally very introverted and not a loudmouth. Not that loudmouths are bad, but I'm.
I know. God love them, but yeah, it's
not
just
me.
not in my nature. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously the West has been an important part of your life, the landscapes, and it fuels your work. But when you look at your work, it's not at all like what somebody would think of when they think of a Western artist.
No, I'm not painting cowboys or.
Yeah. So how does the landscape out there and just the energy of the West fuel your work? I mean, how does the final product comes out and it's obviously been fueled by that, but it's not the stereotypical Western art. So how does that work?
Right. I think I'm really, the biggest thing to me is in my work is storytelling. And I think that, the West as an idea is so ripe with, all of the archetypes you can imagine, in history. It's so important for us to hold on to those stories. And I think when I am composing a painting, I'm really drawn to kind of these flat horizons with these figures in the landscape, kind of composed in a way that tells a story. And so I think that there are things about the West that are pretty universal. So there's, the seeking of the freedom aspect, and there's kind of the connection to the land that I think people are missing now in, greater society. So when I'm putting these figures in the landscape, I think of it as theater almost. It's a really beautiful and kind of an obvious tool to tell these stories. So you have, and when I started painting these figures in the landscape, I wasn't thinking about, I'm painting someone from this time period. I just, from a design perspective, I really wanted, plain clothing and, out in this horizon. And it turns out that's, 19th century agrarian middle America pretty much. And so I've kind of ran with that. But yeah, it's just, you can kind of get, so when you're putting, a man in a landscape out west, that itself holds a lot of meaning to people. They kind of attach their own stories to the scene. And, one of my mentors he's way more of a Western genre painter. His name is Michael Untitled. He's down in Colorado. He's amazing. And a lot of we were talking about this idea of Western art, and a lot of his collectors are, high-powered CEOs. And so they want, a painting in their conference room that's, some guy wrangling a bunch of cows and making deals. And, it's, it pulls out these essential feelings that people have and have been drawn to for obviously a long time.
Oh yeah, definitely. So you mentioned, was it Michael as a mentor, and who are there other mentors, Jeremy and Joshua? But I mean, and they could be alive or dead, people you've met or just admired their work online. I mean, who do you admire as an artist?
So I think, I have a couple, but so yeah, Michael, he was pretty huge when I was first starting to paint, just helping with the direction of where my paintings would go. And the artists that I really admire, that I look at most, that I think have influenced me the most are, definitely, late 19th century painters. There's one, Jules Breton, who is my current favorite, and I think that seeing how valued their paintings are, even in society now, looking at auction records and things, and why has been really inspiring. There's a painting that he did, Jules Breton, It's called Song of the Lark, and it hangs in Chicago, I believe. And it's this beautiful painting of this woman standing in this field, and she kind of has this slightly hopeful but downtrodden look on her face, and she's clearly working really hard. And it's a beautiful painting. And I heard the story recently about Bill Murray actually he was apparently suicidally depressed, and he saw this painting in the Chicago Art Institute, I believe is where it's hanging. Uh-huh. And that painting helped him decide to keep living.
Wow.
Yeah. And just seeing, I guess, the power on a personal level of the impact of art. And
that's intense.
Yeah, it's a beautiful painting. I'll have to look it up. But
what's the name of the painting again? I'm sorry.
It's called Song of the Lark.
Okay, I'll find a link to it so people can click through. I'm interested to look at that, but I won't start playing on Google as we're having a conversation. That's super. Are there any artists, maybe not painters, but just either musicians or actors, actresses, people that you admire, just as one artist admiring another?
Yeah, I'm inspired by a lot of different types of artists, but one recently that I've been really inspired by, Florence Welch of Florence and the Machine. Mm-hmm. She is just a tornado of creative abandon, pretty much. And I think that she has so much innate creativity and so much kind of powerful femininity, and she's just a powerhouse in just who she is.
Yep.
And the work comes out of that, it seems. So I think that, people are really drawn to her, and she is just this magical being. And I'm really inspired by how to cultivate that kind of in yourself ability to create that the rest will stem from.
It'd be interesting to see her, 2 years into her career when she was just kind of starting to accept, all right, I think I can do this. I think I can do that. And then when she finally accepted it and was like, all right, I'm an artist. I don't know, but I would guess that it just exploded because she gave herself permission to just I love the Avett Brothers, that band.
Yeah,
and they're
great.
North Carolina guys. But like Scott, if you look follow him on Instagram, he's obviously this world-class musician, songwriter, but he's also an unbelievable painter.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I think it's just one of these things where he's given himself permission, like I can try this, I can go all in on this, and I've got it. And you see that a lot with these super creative people, that it's not just their main form; there are other things that come out. Like Mark Majori that I had on the podcast. I mean, he was a rock star.
I know,
like a legit, like massive rock star. And then he just took a hard turn and, turned on the creative faucet from the other side. And I love seeing that.
Some people have it. Mm-hmm.
When all right, this is kind of a weird question, but when your degree in psychology and your study of psychology, how has that helped you at all kind of understand the creative mindset?
I think it has.
Yeah.
I think that there's something that I studied a lot in school was how the brain visually takes in information. So when I'm creating a painting, I really am thinking about the design aspect of a painting. So what, the major lights and darks, how your eye makes sense of those. So like if you're looking, so there's areas of, it's like if you're walking out in the woods and your eyes are drawn to areas of high contrast and movement and things like, it's just how our eyes are made. And even like color has psychological meanings. And so there's a lot that I kind of do on purpose in my paintings, thinking about those aspects of how somebody will look at a painting and how it will translate in their brain. That's
cool. That's really cool. I'm glad I asked that. I was thinking that might be kind of weird to ask, so I'm glad I asked.
No, I'm glad you asked, because it was a very expensive thing that I
That's like I say about business school sometimes. Like I could have gotten that for like $500 on Amazon, but all right. All right. So we're coming up on an hour, which is crazy. And I'm not joking. I looked at my notes once, like and then I looked at the clock and I'm like,
this has been a
okay.
blast.
Well, I've got quick questions that I like to ask everybody. Can we run through those real quick? And then I'll let you get back to it. So I always ask people, I'll ask you this first. What's your favorite books related to the American West?
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So I have a couple. One of my favorite Montanan authors, his name is Russell Rowland. Are you familiar with him at all?
No, and I don't think anybody's ever mentioned him that I remember.
Oh, he's great. So he's written 5 or 6 books now, and he's, generational Montanan. His first book, I think it's called In Open Spaces. Uh-huh. It tells the story of his family, the ranch lineage, and kind of the interpersonal dynamics of all of them. And he's a good friend and so funny, and his writing is amazing.
Cool.
He's kind of the essential. He had another book called 56 Counties, where he traveled all around Montana and writes stories from each county, and which is now an NPR radio show.
Oh, wow.
As of July. So he's a fantastic storyteller. Really, really good books.
Cool.
So I highly recommend those. I just started reading. So I have this fascination with these Alaskan women who make it work, and this woman Kristen Pace. Have you heard of her? It just came out. It's called Too Much Country.
I don't think I have heard of that.
She's such a badass. She's like one of the only women to finish the Iditarod and the Yukon Quest.
Damn.
Yeah, she lives in this little, no running water cabin with her husband and toddler, and they've got another baby on the way, and she's so cool. Yeah, and her book is, so far, it's amazing.
Cool. I'll put links to those.
Those 2 are what I would recommend. Yeah.
Are there any books on creativity that you like? We mentioned War of Art. Are there any others?
Yeah. There's one called Daily Rituals that I love. It's about it's a guy that just collected the daily rituals of artists and creative people.
Yep.
Yeah, it's so cool. I love reading about how people manage this weird life, and that's really helped me feel less insane, I guess.
That's worth it.
Yeah.
Cool.
That one. Yeah.
That's a good one. And then what's your favorite book of all time, if you can name it?
Oh, my favorite book of all time.
That's hard.
I know. Probably my favorite book of all time, I would say The Unbearable Lightness of Being.
That one's never been mentioned either. I think you've mentioned 3 of the 4 books you mentioned have never been mentioned before, which is awesome.
So hipster.
Yeah. So any favorite films or documentaries?
I've had satellite internet for the last 5 years, so watching things is almost never happening in my house.
And that's also when your artistic career blossoms, so there's probably a correlation.
There's a direct. Yes, I highly recommend that for anybody trying to do something.
No, that's a great answer. That's a better answer than if you had a film. Like, I don't watch films. No, that's great. Although if you watch Roadhouse, you should watch Roadhouse. You ever seen that?
Oh yeah. I think my mom showed me some scene from that movie once.
I can guarantee everything in your life will improve by a factor of 100 if you watch that. And so you hike, you make art, you live in Montana, you got a cool dog. Is there any activity you do that would be considered weird? Like, do you have any hobbies that are very odd?
Yeah, so my parents, they split when I was young, and so weekends with my dad, he somehow got on this, I don't know where, I think he saw it on Oprah or something, 15 years ago, paranormal photography.
Yeah. I meant to ask you about this. That's why I didn't look at my damn notes. And I'm so glad you brought this up. Okay. Yeah. Let it rip. Go.
So we started getting into this, and it was a really fun way for us to spend time together. But weekends with my dad were spent in graveyards and in haunted houses,
Looking for ghosts.
Looking for ghosts, yeah. And we, had all the equipment, and it was, looking back, I mean, it's so funny.
I need to get your dad on the podcast.
Yeah, you should. He's good.
Wait, so did you ever see one?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
And recorded.
You
yeah.
really saw a ghost?
Yeah. So
was it scary?
I'm going to sound like a lunatic, but
no. I love this stuff.
So it's, there are ways that you can, and I don't know how scientific this is, but, they say that, so my dad's, so my grandfather on that side, they have a ranch out in Joseph, Oregon.
Yeah.
And there was one of the houses on the property is, it used to be, way back before, it was in our ownership, was used as a school for troubled youth Native American boys,
wow.
which is so problematic in so many ways. But so there's, a lot of this, this kind of, dark history to this house, and it's been dilapidated for many years. And so it was kind of our, every summer we'd be out there, and it was like the mecca of ghost hunting was this house. And so we'd be out there with, video cameras and EVP monitors. And so one time we were out there as a kid, and so we're filming this, us going into this house, and it was definitely a creepy night, and lots of, sounds and movement and things. And then we get back to the camp, and we're watching the video of us walking up to this house, and clear as day, there was this loud yelling voice on the video that says, "Stay away."
What?
Loudly. Yeah.
But you didn't hear it when you actually were there? No.
Yeah. So it was just when you watched the video. And it was obviously not my dad. And I was 12 years old, so this was like the craziest thing in the world. And
I'm 41 years old, and that's the craziest thing.
I know.
Good God.
Yeah.
Did it scare you?
Yeah.
I'm scared right now.
I know. And so it was so fun, as a kid doing that. And now my dad he's now a major Bigfoot connoisseur. So now
any progress there?
He goes to all the conferences, and there's a TV show about Bigfoot apparently, and he goes and hangs out with all those guys. And I really want to go out on a big Bigfoot expedition. So I'll let you know how that goes.
Hell yeah. I love hearing stuff like that. That's super
so
cool.
Funny.
Yeah. If he sees Bigfoot, open invite on the podcast.
I know you'll have to come out on a Bigfoot expedition.
I'd love
all
to
these
do
guys
that.
are.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
There's some podcast that just came out. I haven't listened to it, but I've seen it advertised. One of these NPR reporters goes on looking for Bigfoot on the circuit.
Oh, really?
And I think it's pretty. I've heard good things about it. So, all right.
Yeah, there's.
I'm in.
Sweet.
Well, you may have already answered this by seeing a ghost, but what's the most powerful experience you've ever had outdoors? And it could be scary, it could be funny, which maybe all that could describe all the parts of seeing the ghost. Is there one that comes to mind other than that?
Yeah, I think so. When I first moved to Montana, I was living out at the base, the foothills of the Bridger Mountains, and I was, just trying to figure out how to exist in this environment. And I didn't have phone service or anything, and so I had a lot of really funny wildlife encounters out there, and I ended up having this bear, black bear, who clearly had, he was skilled in finding people's trash and things, and unfortunately, but he was around a lot, and I ended up naming him Jeff because he was just a regular staple in the and so I lived in this little cabin, and it actually had a garage attached to it, so it kind of became this saga of dealing with Jeff. And I had so I didn't know that they could lift up the garage door, you had to lift it up. It wasn't an automatic one, and it was a heavy door, with a handle. And so I'd be in the house and I'd hear something lifting up this garage door. So I'd have to run out there and scare him out of the garage. And then, after that happened, one or two times, I got a little smarter, and I ended up zip tying the garage door shut.
Yeah.
So that he wouldn't have any access to the food, hopefully. And but then it was almost scarier because my bedroom was, it was a weird place, but my bedroom had a door that went right into the garage. So I'd be laying there at night, and you could hear this bear trying to pull this door open, and the whole house is shaking, just like massive strength. And I'd be laying there in bed, just like praying that he wasn't gonna.
Oh my God.
It was crazy. And then one day I parked my car, and I had one of the back doors rolled down for my dog, and I stupidly forgot. And the next morning I go outside, and my dog, who I also named Bear, he's acting really strange around the car. He won't go near it. And I'm looking, and I kind of and it dawns on me that Jeff got into my car. And so there were footprints all over the windshield on top of the car, and then these claw marks. I had leather seats, and he got in there and just punctured all over the car. And luckily it didn't do as much damage as you think a bear would do in your car.
Yeah.
But so I drove it fine, and but it was just this, a couple year long saga of dealing with this bear, and learned how to coexist. And
those things are powerful. When I lived in Boulder, they'd come in my yard, and one time one of them ripped down the gate on my fence, just ripped it right off the hinges.
They're amazing.
Yeah,
oh my
and just
gosh,
it was probably a little tiny black bear, so that makes you think, what could a grizzly do?
Oh, I know.
So last kind of big question, and it's kind of a hard one, but if you could make a request of the people that listen to this podcast, or offer some words of wisdom, because you've got such a unique perspective on, following your passion, even later in life, you were after, post college, and you figured it out. Yeah. So do you have any words of wisdom for everybody that listens?
I think that the biggest thing for me when I was considering jumping off and following this idea was that, I kind of purposefully didn't give myself a safety net.
Yep.
And I think that there's something about the West that kind of drives people to be kind of brave and stupid sometimes. but I think that there's something to not having a plan B.
Uh-huh.
And, putting all your eggs in one basket, really you build a better basket.
Yeah.
And I think that translates to a lot of things in life. And I think as far as, a plea to people thinking about our wild spaces, and this is going to sound really hippy dippy, but I have hummingbird feeders in my yard, and I was watching them one day and watching this little bird at this feeder, and somebody shot off a gun far away, far enough away that it wouldn't have really startled me. But suddenly this bird just stopped feeding and kind of jumped and kind of frantically flew around. And then, so I think I was just thinking about how watching that really small, direct impact of humans on something that they wouldn't even think about.
Yep.
When they're, behaving or, doing something. So I think just be aware and be quiet.
No, I think that's great advice. I think that's very, very wise, and I think things would be a lot better if everybody followed that. Well, how can people learn more about your work? Follow you online. Don't distract her though. People,
right.
Don't send a bunch of
Don't
silly messages. Yeah. Where are you on the internet?
So I'm most active, I think, on Instagram. So it's just Morgan Irons. I do have a website, morganirons.com. My work is here in Bozeman at Old Main Gallery. I'll have my next solo show in May of 2020. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for your time. This was super interesting.
Thanks, Ed. This has been awesome.
Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast, and thanks for listening to that particular episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Before you go, I've got 3 quick things. Number 1, if you like the podcast, please do me a huge favor. Either pass it along to a friend who may be interested, share it on your social media, or go to iTunes and give it a 5-star review. All those things would mean a lot to me, and they would really help to spread the word about the podcast. Number 2, if you've listened to many of these episodes, you know that I love reading and I love talking about books. Every other month, I send out a quick email with a few books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The subjects are varied, but they're pretty much all nonfiction with an emphasis on history, biographies, adventure narratives, and topics related to the American West. There are no sales pitches for ranches, no spam, no other kind of nonsense, just books. So if you'd like to sign up for the list, head to Mountain and Prairie/reading, or just go to Mountain and Prairie and there's a massive tab at the top that says book recommendations. Click on it. There are a ton of good books that I've read. Some of the old email lists are on there. You can go crazy. There are a lot of books. And finally, if you know anyone I should interview for the podcast, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. All my contact info is at mountainandprairie.com, and I'm on all the social media stuff, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. So feel free to reach out. I'd love to have some recommendations and suggestions of interesting people I should meet. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.